Kozlowski was supposed to be climbing with a team of 12 experienced mountaineers attempting the Abruzzi Spur route to K2's summit. Instead, he was climbing alone when the mountain killed him. His teammates found his empty tent at Camp the Third the morning after the avalanche, his sleeping bag still warm, his breakfast half-eaten. The only trace of him was a single crampon driven deep into the ice wall, as if he had been ripped away mid-step. Search teams spent 6 days combing the death zone before giving up. The mountain had claimed another victim, and like so many others, Dmitry Kozlowski simply disappeared into the white silence of the world's second highest peak. But glaciers never forget. They preserve everything in their slow, grinding descent toward the valleys below. Every climber who dies on K2 becomes part of the ice, their bodies and equipment frozen in time, moving millimeter by millimeter down the mountain face. Dr. Volkov's glaciology team was studying ice core samples when they discovered Kozlowski's rope protruding from a section of glacier that had shifted dramatically since 2008. The rope's position told them everything about his final moments. He had fallen 2,300 feet straight down the bottleneck, the most dangerous section of K2's summit approach. The bottleneck is a narrow couloir beneath a massive ice cliff called the Serac. Every climber attempting K2's summit must pass through. This 400-meter corridor, where house-sized blocks of ice hang suspended above the climbing route. The Serac shifts constantly, groaning and cracking as the mountain's temperatures fluctuate. Most climbers try to pass through the bottleneck before dawn, when the ice is most stable. Kozlowski entered the bottleneck at 11:47 a.m. on August 1st, 2008, according to his GPS tracker's final transmission. The temperature was already rising. The Serac was beginning to move. His climbing log, recovered from base camp after his disappearance, revealed that Kozlowski had been climbing without sleep for 36 hours straight. He had started his summit attempt at 2 a.m. from Camp 4, but severe weather forced him to retreat twice. By his third attempt, exhaustion and altitude sickness were affecting his judgment. His handwriting in the final entry was barely legible. Must reach summit today, weather window closing, cannot wait for team. The last words he wrote were, "Starting bottleneck approach now." He signed it with the time, 11:42 a.m. The avalanche hit at 11:51 a.m. Seismic monitors at base camp registered the ice slide as a magnitude 3.2 tremor. The collapse sent 5,000 tons of ice and rock cascading down the bottleneck at 120 miles per hour. 3 other climbers were caught in the same avalanche. 2 survived with severe injuries. The third, a German climber named Wolfgang Brenner, was found buried under 4 feet of ice debris, his skull crushed by a block of ice the size of a refrigerator. Kozlowski was never found because he had been climbing higher up the couloir when the Serac collapsed. The avalanche carried his body over the edge of the bottleneck's lower cliff, where it fell into the glacier's main accumulation zone. Dr. Volkov's analysis of the rope's position within the ice layers revealed that Kozlowski had fallen alive. The blood pattern on the rope showed that his hands had been gripping the cord as he fell, his palms torn open by the friction. The rope itself was still attached to a titanium ice screw, suggesting that his protection held during the initial impact. But the force of a 2,300-foot fall on a dynamic climbing rope creates approximately 12,000 pounds of impact force. No human body can survive that kind of deceleration. The rope that preserved evidence of his final moments also became the instrument that killed him. The glacier had moved Kozlowski's remains exactly 847 meters down the mountain face over 16 years, following the natural flow patterns that Dr. Volkov's team had been mapping since 2019. The ice moves faster in summer months when meltwater lubricates the glacier's base, slowing dramatically during winter. Based on the rope's position and the known flow rates, they calculated that Kozlowski's body was now buried approximately 200 feet deeper in the glacier, somewhere near the ice fall that marks the boundary between K2's technical climbing routes and the approach marches. But the rope wasn't the only thing the glacier had preserved. Embedded in the same ice section, Dr. Volkov found fragments of Kozlowski's red summit suit, his titanium crampon points, and pieces of his carbon fiber helmet. Each item was positioned differently within the ice layers, telling the story of how his body and equipment had been distributed by the avalanche impact. The helmet fragments were found 30 meters away from the rope, suggesting that the impact had been violent enough to tear his safety equipment apart. His crampon points were driven into the ice at impossible angles, twisted by forces that no living person could have survived. The most disturbing discovery came when Dr. Volkov's team analyzed the ice immediately surrounding the rope. Microscopic examination revealed organic material frozen within the ice crystals, hair follicles, skin cells, fragments of bone. The avalanche hadn't just killed Kozlowski, it had pulverized his body and distributed the remains throughout tons of ice and rock debris. The crimson rope was essentially his headstone, the only coherent piece of evidence that Dmitry Kozlowski had ever existed at all. Kozlowski's climbing background made his death even more shocking to the mountaineering community. He had successfully Summited Everest 3 times, survived a night trapped at 27,500 feet during a 2004 expedition, and completed first ascents on technical routes throughout the Himalayas. His alpine resume included solo ascents of Mont Blanc, the Matterhorn, and Denali. He was considered one of Poland's most experienced high-altitude climbers. But K2 doesn't care about experience. The mountain kills experts as easily as it kills beginners. The 2008 climbing season on K2 was particularly deadly. 11 climbers died attempting the summit between July and August, making it the worst single season in the mountain's climbing history. Most of the deaths occurred during a single weekend when multiple teams attempted summit pushes simultaneously. Traffic jams formed in the bottleneck as climbers waited for fixed ropes to clear. The delays forced climbers to remain in the death zone longer than their oxygen supplies could sustain. Some died from exhaustion, others from exposure. Kozlowski died because he refused to wait. His wife Anna had begged him not to attempt K2 after his close call on Everest in 2004. During that expedition, Kozlowski had been trapped in a tent at Camp 4 for 18 hours, while hurricane-force winds threatened to blow him off the mountain. When rescue teams finally reached him, his core body temperature had dropped to 89 degrees Fahrenheit. He was barely conscious, suffering from severe hypothermia and pulmonary edema. The rescue required 6 Sherpas and consumed most of the expedition's emergency oxygen supplies. Anna made him promise that K2 would be his final major expedition. She wanted him to retire from high-altitude mountaineering while he was still alive. Kozlowski agreed to make K2 his farewell climb, but the promise haunted him during the months of preparation. His training logs show an obsessive focus on physical conditioning that bordered on self-destruction. He was running 15 miles daily at 6,000-foot elevation, climbing frozen waterfalls in temperatures below minus 20 degrees Fahrenheit, and practicing technical rescue scenarios until his hands bled. From rope burn, his climbing partners noticed that he seemed desperate to prove something to himself. One teammate later told investigators that Kozlowski talked constantly about earning the right to quit by summiting K2 cleanly without assistance or bottled oxygen. The irony of his death was that Kozlowski had been climbing without supplemental oxygen when the avalanche hit. He was attempting a pure ascent of K2, relying only on his body's natural ability to process the thin air above 26,000 feet. Only 47 people had successfully summited K2 without bottled oxygen at the time of his attempt. The lack of supplemental oxygen severely impaired his judgment during the final summit push. Hypoxia at that altitude creates symptoms identical to severe alcohol intoxication, confusion, poor decision-making, and inability to assess risks accurately. The same determination that had kept him alive during previous expeditions became the factor that killed him on K2. Dr. Volkov's team spent 6 days excavating the ice section where they found Kozlowski's rope. Using steam probes and precision cutting tools, they extracted a complete core sample containing the preserved remains. The ice core revealed that the avalanche had created a debris field spanning 200 square meters, with Kozlowski's body and equipment scattered throughout the frozen mass. Carbon dating of organic material within the ice confirmed that everything had been buried simultaneously during a single catastrophic event. The avalanche had essentially created a time capsule, preserving the exact moment when one of Poland's most experienced mountaineers died alone on the world's most dangerous mountain. The discovery reopened questions about search and rescue protocols on K2. Unlike Everest, where commercial helicopter services can reach altitudes up to 23,000 feet, K2's location in the Karakoram Range makes helicopter rescue impossible above base camp. Once climbers enter the technical climbing zones above 19,000 feet, they are entirely dependent on their teammates for emergency assistance. Kozlowski's decision to climb alone removed even that minimal safety net. When the avalanche hit, there was no one close enough to witness his fall, no one to mark his position, no one to report exactly what had happened. He simply vanished into the mountain's white immensity. The psychological profile that emerged from his personal journal suggested that Kozlowski was struggling with survivor's guilt from previous expeditions. During his 2004 Everest near-death experience, 2 Sherpas had risked their lives to save him. One of them, Pemba Norbu, suffered severe frostbite while dragging Kozlowski to safety and lost 3 toes as a result. Kozlowski's journals reveal an obsession with paying back the debt he felt he owed to the climbing community. He donated thousands of dollars to support families of dead Sherpa guides, sponsored climbing equipment for impoverished mountaineers, and volunteered hundreds of hours training rescue techniques at climbing schools throughout Europe. But the guilt never left him. His final journal entry, written at K2 base camp 3 days before his death, contained a passage that his wife later described as his suicide note disguised as motivation. The mountain always collects what it's owed. I have borrowed time from K2 through luck and other people's sacrifices. Today I pay my own price. If I die here, at least it will be with my own hands on the rope, my own feet on the ice, my own decision to climb. No one else will be hurt saving me. The mountain can take what belongs to it. The rope that Dr. Volkov pulled from the glacier bore the manufacturer's markings from Mammoth, a Swiss company that produces some of the world's strongest mountaineering equipment. The specific model was a 10-point cumulator infinity dynamic rope, rated to withstand multiple high-impact falls. Laboratory testing revealed that the rope had failed not from impact stress, but from abrasion against sharp ice edges during Kozlowski's fall. Microscopic analysis showed hundreds of tiny cuts along the rope's surface, where it had scraped against the glacier walls. The rope had essentially been sawed in half by the ice itself as Kozlowski fell through the avalanche debris. This discovery contradicted previous assumptions about how climbers die during avalanches on K2. Most mountaineering safety experts believed that avalanche victims either suffocated under ice burial or died from impact trauma when struck by falling debris. Kozlowski's case revealed a third mechanism. Climbers could survive the initial avalanche impact only to die when their safety equipment failed during the fall that followed. His rope had protected him from the first impacts, but couldn't withstand the prolonged abrasion of a 2,300-foot descent through moving ice and rock. The emotional impact on Dr. Volkov's research team was severe. 3 of the glaciologists had to be rotated off the expedition after developing symptoms of post-traumatic stress from handling Kozlowski's remains. Dr. Volkov herself admitted in later interviews that she had nightmares for months after the discovery. The preserved blood on the rope created a visceral connection to Kozlowski's final moments that none of the scientists had anticipated. They weren't just studying ice formations. They were witnessing the last minutes of a human life that had been frozen in time for 16 years. Anna Kozlowski flew to Pakistan when Dr. Volkov's team contacted her about the discovery. She had remarried in 2015, 7 years after her husband's disappearance, but insisted on personally identifying the rope and equipment fragments. The identification process took place at the University of Islamabad, where the ice samples had been transported for detailed analysis. Anna confirmed that the rope matched the climbing equipment inventory that Dmitry had submitted before his expedition. She also identified unique wear patterns on his crampon points that corresponded to his distinctive climbing technique. The meeting between Anna and Dr. Volkov lasted 4 hours. Anna described her husband's obsession with technical climbing details, his habit of marking his equipment with tiny scratches to track wear patterns, and his superstitious belief that each rope developed a personality based on how many climbs it had completed safely. The rope pulled from K2's glacier had been Dmitry's favorite piece of equipment. He had used it during his successful Everest summits and called it his lifeline to home. Anna broke down when she realized that his lifeline had become the only evidence that he had ever existed on the mountain that killed him. Dr. Volkov's final report on the K2 glacier discovery was published in the Journal of Glaciology in December 2024. The paper documented not just the technical aspects of ice preservation, but the human story embedded within the glacier's layers. Kozlowski's death had been preserved in exact detail by the ice, creating what Dr. Volkov described as the most complete record of a mountaineering fatality ever recovered from a high-altitude environment. The rope, the blood, the equipment fragments, and the organic remains told a story more detailed than any eyewitness account could have provided. The discovery changed how mountaineering organizations approach search and rescue protocols on K2. New safety requirements mandate that all climbers carry GPS beacons that transmit location data every 15 minutes while above 2,000 feet. Solo climbing attempts above the technical climbing zones are now prohibited during high avalanche risk periods. The changes came too late to save Dmitry Kozlowski, but his death, preserved perfectly in the glacier's memory, continues to save. Lived 16 years after the mountain claimed him. The Crimson Rope now sits in a climate-controlled storage facility at the Polish National Museum in Warsaw. Anna donated it after the investigation concluded, believing that her husband would want his story to educate other climbers about K2's dangers. Museum visitors often ask why the rope is displayed in a refrigerated case. The answer is simple. After 16 years frozen in K2's glacier, the rope can only survive in sub-zero temperatures. Like Dmitry Kozlowski's memory, it remains forever, preserved by ice, a testament to the mountain that never forgets and never forgives the climbers who dare to challenge its deadly heights.